Welcome to the MilCom Founders Podcast, where we champion and celebrate military community business founders. In each episode, we will talk with a MilCom business founder to learn how they work through various obstacles and opportunities in business and in life. I'm your host, Rod Lochis. Let's meet today's guest. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Nathan Gray, an Army combat veteran who served our country worldwide, including deployments in South Korea and Iraq, where he specialized as an electronic warfare technician. After transitioning from military service, Nate founded MeshComm Engineering in Johnstown, Colorado. His company mission is to connect the world to solve complex human and environmental challenges. Nate's commitment to service extends beyond his business. Nate and I work together in Bunker Labs and now the IVMF Ambassadors Program. I've really enjoyed getting to know Nate over the past year and a half through that program. It's been great to get to know you, Nate. Welcome. But Nate, let's start with your name, rank, and serial numbers. Tell us about you. We'll get into business in a second. I want to know about you and who you are.
My name is Nate Gray. I am the founder of MeshComm Engineering. I really am a very service-oriented person. My joy in life comes out of seeing other people succeed, seeing other people get through the challenges that they face. And I really love service from that perspective. I have a large family, which a lot of people tend to raise eyebrows at. I have 6 children, 1 son and 5 daughters. My oldest is 26. My youngest is 15.
Wow.
15 going on, I think.
Yeah, it's 6 kids within 11 years. Wow.
It's honestly a lot of fun. My oldest son is married. He's got 2 twin daughters. They are such a blast to be around. And so, yeah, our family big. We really love being together. We really love helping each other out and working through the challenges that I think every family has. And we're no different than anybody else. We have our challenges, right? I think the thing that I've learned is that what really brings me joy in life isn't money, isn't the tangibles in the world. It's the interactions that I get with people. We recently had a fly-in as ambassadors. You mentioned we're both in the ambassador program. And I think the thing that I loved the most about this last fly-in was I had an opportunity to reconnect with several individuals that have been going through some fairly tough times in their lives and really had some good in-depth conversations with them and really just got to know them a little bit better and offer some perspectives and some things like that. And that was honestly the highlight of my week out there. Learned a lot, had a lot of great opportunities, but the opportunity to serve and to really be a part of somebody's life rather than just be an associate, I think was actually a big highlight for me.
That's a great insight. I think the ambassador program with IVMF is exactly right. It's about building, like everything, it's about building those relationships. Not just the connections are just touching, but intertwining, interweaving is the relationship. And how do you make that happen? That's a really good insight. If you could share with me, what's something you like to do outside work?
I think like many entrepreneurs out there, I have many interests. Some of the things I really love doing are, I love trail running. I love rock climbing, bouldering. I'm not super great at either of those, but I really enjoy getting outside. I love hiking, backpacking, getting out in nature. Anything that gets me outside is something I really enjoy. I am learning as I get older. I'm not so much of a fan of the cold weather, but it gets me close to the mountains and I'll tolerate it to get outside. It's fine. But really, those are some of my big interests. I also enjoy astronomy. I've got a telescope that I love to get out and look at things like the eclipses and planets and things like that.
So how far outside, like I'll say Denver, do you live?
It used to be a small town in the country. It's now getting absorbed into the Denver metropolitan area. I'm about an hour north of Denver. It's a little town called Johnstown, but it's not quite so little anymore. It's grown fairly significantly. And I really enjoy being on the outside of the city, being able to get access to the city, but not actually having to live in the city. And so I really enjoy the peace of solitude that kind of comes with living in the slower area of life, but then being able to get access to the amenities of what a city can bring as well. It's a perfect balance for me.
Absolutely. My wife has a great saying. She says, it's nice to be close to the crazy, but not in the crazy. That's what we have in the Washington, D.C. area too. So definitely can understand that's for sure.
But that thing is you have to drive through the traffic into the crazy. So
yes, that's very true. So Nate, what's a personal challenge that you would feel comfortable sharing that you've gone through in your own life?
I'll talk about something I think that might be really difficult to talk about from a lot of people. As you mentioned, I did spend 11 years in the military. I did deploy to Korea and Iraq. When I was in Iraq, I did go through some experiences that were challenging, including an evening where we came under indirect fire and the vehicle I was in was blown up. Went through some challenges with that. What I did not realize after that was what that was going to bring to me as I reintegrated with my family when I came home from Iraq. And then later, as I started the business, what the stress of starting a business was going to do to me from a mental health perspective. And I think that's something that when I was younger, I was like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm going to be just fine. But if you talk to my wife, when I came home from Iraq, I was a mess. And I did not want to admit that. It was a really difficult transition for our family. When I look back at that now and realizing what my family went through, we should have had a lot more help than we had. And I just didn't even know that I needed it at that point in time. And from two perspectives, one, the Army didn't want to admit that I needed it when I got out because they did not want to diagnose anybody with PTSD at that point in time. And the second thing is I didn't want to admit to myself that I actually needed some help with some stuff. And that was actually a pretty long journey for me, and really didn't come to a head until a couple of years into starting the business, when some things became really stressful and I realized that I had a really bad problem and I was in a really dark place and nearly walked away from everything. And so there's some real challenges that they come from that. Thank goodness I had some good friends around me who saw what was going on and was able to help me get the right kind of help into my life and help me get back on track. And honestly, I have to credit the VIR program through Bunker Labs to some extent here too, because it was about this time that I was really starting to hit the climax of some of this stuff, and having others around me who were going through trying to start their businesses up, experiencing similar stress, really helped me understand that I wasn't alone in my struggle. And actually, there were a couple other folks that I think had it way worse than I did, way more challenging experiences than what I ever went through. I consider myself was really like on the edge of what I think a lot of people experienced out there, and others went through some things way harder than I did and were dealing with way bigger challenges. And so it really kind of helped me put some things into perspective. Not to say that I wasn't dealing with stuff and that I didn't need help. I absolutely did, but it also helped me understand that, hey, look, there are other opportunities here that I can actually serve and help. And at least in this case, I have a way to relate to somebody that's going through this because I've been through some similar things. And so that actually was really good for me. And it was a turning point for me. One of the things that I realized in this process was that the best way for me to work through this was actually to serve and let go of myself. And so I found that when I was so focused on the business and nothing else, and I wasn't there for my family, and I wasn't there for my friends, and wasn't there to help be available to serve others, that actually was far more damaging to me from a mental health perspective than anything else.
Yeah. God bless you. And thank you for having the courage to go through all that and to share that. I think that it's interesting. Business can be a way to serve, and it is a way to serve, and not just ourselves, but our clients, our team members, our family, our community. And it's wonderful to hear that you've also experienced that same type of thing.
I think there's a realization that kind of comes when you start a business, right? You're taking a responsibility on you that is much bigger, right? You're now no longer responsible for just yourself and your family. You're also now responsible for those who you work for, your customers, the impact you're trying to make in the world. You have decided to take on all of this responsibility. And if your only motivation for doing that is because I want to get rich, I think you're going to be really disappointed.
100%. Yeah, it's about helping and serving everyone, all your stakeholders that work with you. And if you're not helping them all win, what's the point? Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again. So with the military to business transition, what's one or two concepts or ideas or insights, Nate, that you've seen that you use in business, that you rely on business?
I think one of them is in the military, you don't quit till the mission is done. That's just one of those things that it gets drilled into you. I think the same thing applies in business. Just the persistence that you gain in the military, the figure out, okay, maybe the first idea for how to accomplish what you needed to accomplish didn't work, but let's adapt and overcome. And so there's that mantra that I grew up with in the military that I think really applies well in business, because no plan survives first contact with the enemy. It's the same thing with business, right? Your first idea doesn't work. Usually requires some modification, and that requires you to go out and talk to people and to talk with customers and to really understand what's going on so that you can truly solve the problem that needs to be solved out there. And this might lead a little bit to some of the things we want to talk about later here in a minute. But I think one of the biggest skills really that I think has been most valuable to me is just that persistence. And then beyond that, I think the other thing that the military is really good at is instilling leadership ethos, the servant leadership ethos into you at a very young age, starting from when you just start to join the military. Even in basic training, the leadership value of honor and selfless service and so forth, those things come through right from day one, and they're really embodied in all of the training that you have going forward. And I think those are really important to emulate as a leader, because if you're going to take on the responsibility to run a business, you're going to be looked to for how are we going to set the culture in our business? How are we going to interact with our customers? How are we going to treat each other? All of that stuff happens based off of how you decide to operate inside the business.
That's right. Interesting, because you talked about service earlier, and it just really came to mind. How many of the veteran community give back? It's almost in our nature. How do we find our unique way as a veteran to give back?
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting that you highlight that. I think it's an important piece of the healing of the understanding is to give back. So that's amazing. That's really cool.
Part of every one of our journey to become better and probably to some extent heal.
Yeah, and it's also one of the insightful was that you talk to your friends and your family. For me, I always come down this silly little saying. So like one is adapt, improvise, overcome. Okay, where did I learn that? This little green organization called the Army. One that I really rely on is, to me, life is about our faith, our family, and our friends. If we go back to those three core things, how good life can be is, yeah, I definitely get that. And thank gosh we have those in our lives.
And honestly, as I look back, my experience over the last 5 years alone, just trying to get this business off the ground, if I didn't have my faith, if I didn't have my friends and my family, I wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't be talking today.
Yeah, God bless you. Yeah. So, oof, powerful stuff. So let's talk about your business. Why did you start MeshCom?
That's a great question. Sometimes I wonder. Really, it came down to I have been interested in communications my whole life since I was a young kid. If you want to know how weird and crazy I really am, I was that kid who started teaching himself how to code at age 9 because my dad brought home a computer. And I said, wow, that looks really cool. I'm going to do some stuff with that. And then I would go to Radio Shack and buy engineers mini notebooks so I could teach myself enough electronics to build communication circuits. And my friend and I would experiment with communications all the time. We have these walkie-talkies. We'd walk out, figure out exactly how we could get them to reach so we could still communicate. And when we wanted to use them to get past our curfews at night, we figured out that we couldn't get enough range out of them. But his dad was an outfitter and had the CB radio station, and he had a couple of handheld CB radios. So one night, here's this handheld. He gave me the 5-watt handheld, and he had the base station at his house, and we started talking back and forth to each other. What we didn't realize is that every trucker in the area is also on those CB radios. We started talking to truckers. And one night we were doing that, and we had hit an atmospheric bounce. We didn't realize what was going on, but we were actually talking to, so I grew up just outside of Boise, Idaho, a little town called Eagle. And we started talking to truckers that were crossing on the highway from Oregon into California one night. And we were like,
Wow.
so 1,200 miles away from where we're at, right? And so we're having this conversation. My parents didn't realize any of this was going on. I told them this years later, and they're like, what? But this is what my buddy and I were doing. And the thing that has always stuck with me is I went into the military, and I obviously was in the electronic warfare stuff. And one of the biggest challenges in the world is like, how do I get connected when I'm outside of a city where I really to be able to talk to or communicate critical information? How do I actually do that? And the military has its systems and ways of doing that. But when you get outside the military, in the civilian world, there's still lots of needs for that kind of stuff. And there's just not a seamless way of doing that. And the reason why I founded my business is because I wanted to make that seamless. I wanted to combine the technologies that we have, the capabilities with satellite communications with cellular. I wanted to get that to be a much lower cost solution and integrate those together so that we could really open the door to a huge number of applications that are very difficult to tackle today at a reasonable cost. And that anything from monitoring wells and irrigation systems to water tanks on farms to communications inside a vehicle. One of my customers right now, one of his biggest complaints is if I'm driving from point A to point B and I'm in a rural area, 2/3 of that I'm outside of coverage. So I'm pulled over and having conversations with my customer because I know if I go down this hill, I'm going to be out of coverage for the next 30 minutes. So I've got to sit here for 2 hours, have these conversations before I lose coverage and get to the place I actually need to go. He's like, I could just talk. And so the foundation of MeshComm Engineering and our ethos is really just to connect. Don't worry about where you're at. Don't worry about the technology behind it. We want to make that as seamless as possible. We just want you to connect.
Got it. So give me the elevator pitch for MeshComm. I'm not put in the spot, but maybe I just did.
Basically, essentially, we work with businesses and organizations that operate in rural and remote areas that don't have great cellular or internet connectivity, and we help you solve that problem.
Got it. And you have a device, or is it a service? Or
combination of a service and a product. So that can be everything from we can help you get managed satellite services into a business at your location. That could be I need to be able to get information off of this water tank on my farm so that I don't lose operations when that happens. And so we have a product that will actually help you do that. And the idea is that it doesn't really matter whether or not you've got cellular coverage or not. We will be able to help you get that connected.
Got it. Okay. Let's go into the opportunity or obstacle now. And we might talk about two, but let's talk about the one that you and I worked on over the past year, and you've really become an evangelist for. So share with us what that is.
So I think every business starts with an idea. and a vision. But when it comes to actually getting somebody to pay for or to buy that, there's a challenge. It immediately comes in. And there's this process that you have to go through to really figure out, how do I actually sell my product? How do I actually solve a problem that people are willing to pay for? That process is called customer development or customer discovery. And there's really a process to this. And it's not something that is highlighted enough in accelerator programs or other business topics. A lot of people jump right to sales and marketing. That's how you're going to get your customers. This is actually the fundamental stuff that needs to happen so that you can build an actual sales plan and build an actual marketing plan. The thing is, when you start a business, that you don't actually know whether or not the problem you decided to solve with your business is something that people are willing to pay for. You know that they will, but you don't actually know that. And the only way you find out about that is you have to go talk to a lot of people, and you have to go figure out who's willing to pay for this. And you need to do that soon in your business before you've invested a lot of money, because if it's not something people are going to want to pay for, then you don't want to invest $500,000 or whatever it takes to get that product developed, only to find out nobody's going to buy it. And so you're stuck, especially if you're in sort of a tech industry, and if you're a technical founder like I am, we are really good at the product development things and say, okay, I see this problem. Okay, I can build the system to solve that problem. But we are not so good at understanding whether or not there's a segment of the population out there that's willing to pay for that problem to be solved, and really actually sizing the size of that market. And I would say that I'm still really learning this, going through this process in my business. But there's a way to think about this from a sort of a pyramid perspective. At the bottom of the pyramid, there's all the people that have this problem. And then the next layer up in that pyramid is all the people who know that they have this problem, but may not have even done anything or researched or tried to do anything about it. The next layer up on there are all the people who are actively looking for a solution for this problem. And then the next step above that is, okay, not only are they looking for a solution, they're trying to put one together, or they have put one together and it's failed or it's worked, and here's why it has or hasn't. And then at the top of that pyramid are all of those people. And then they also have a budget to actually solve that problem. And the thing is, like, the budget matters because you can't sell anything if they don't have a budget. And so no matter where you're at in that pyramid, if they don't have a budget, they're not gonna buy from you.
That's right. And this is part of, what's the program it's part of? The bigger Steve Blank.
So you can find so Steve Blank wrote a book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And this is really well laid out in there. Really, the first 3 chapters lay out this whole process of what you're looking for. And actually, the customer at the very top of that pyramid is really what he refers to as an early evangelist customer. This is somebody that is so invested in this problem, they will pay you to solve the problem, basically. Because at this point, when you're talking to them, you don't actually have a product. You have an idea. Maybe you have an MVP or a very rough demonstration that you can solve the problem enough that they're willing to pay for you to actually put some polish on that and truly solve their problem for them, because it's that big of a problem. They're willing to pay for that. And at the first stage of your business, what you need to do is find 10 or 20 of those guys that are willing to do that, because this problem is such a big need that they are willing to do whatever it takes to solve that. And then, so really you're targeting the first top 2 layers of that pyramid. They're the guys that have the budget, and they're actively trying to solve that problem right now today. They need it solved. They know it's there. They need it solved. They're going to solve it one way or another. Either they build it themselves or they have somebody come in and build it. And their preference is that they really want to stay focused on the core of their business, but this problem exists for them. And if you can come in and solve them, that's really what they want.
It's interesting because just last week, Nate, I realized that my first experience with customer development was when I was 19 years old back in college. And what happened was I was the house manager of a fraternity, and my roommate was the social champion. And so we were always having kegs delivered to the house, and then they're always sitting around. They're always all over the place, and always a big mess. So I thought, I got to pick up. What if I take these back and forth to the fraternity? I did it, and my roommate said, that's great. And I said, I wonder. So I went around and asked every fraternity house if they needed help getting their kegs delivered and returned back to the distributor. Almost every one of them said yes. So I didn't go out and buy a truck. I didn't go do this, that, and the other. I went and asked the question. And then the next week I did 10 fraternities. And then people were calling me, hey, can you pick up ours? It was an amazing first experience with customer development. Let's go out and ask the questions, meet the prospective clients, and find out what they need. So it's a pretty amazing experience. I didn't know it's called customer development way back in the day, but that's what it was.
I think a lot of us in business kind of fall into this. We don't realize we're doing it. It's by accident we fall into it, and maybe even by necessity. And that's kind of what happened to me. Is I had to figure this out, or I was going to lose my business. But you also hit on something that I think is really important. When you start to figure out that there's a market for your service, what happens is that instead of you pushing, the string pulls you.
I like that. That's a great saying.
So, like in your case, right? All of a sudden, these fraternities start calling you. Right? There's a demand there because they're like, "Hey, there's this guy that will do this. We'll just have him come in and do this for us." Right. And so now the demand starts to pull you instead of you trying to push the demand. And
That's right.
when you're having to do the pushing, now at a certain point, you have to do the sales and the marketing and stuff like that. So that you start to transition into that so you can get the word out there. But really what you're trying to do is you're trying to get demand to recognize that you exist so that they will pull you along in your business, right? Push it, then something is not quite right. You haven't quite figured out product market fit. And that's something that I think we're bouncing between in our business. Do we really have product market fit, or is it? So, people are calling me up on a weekly basis saying, "Hey, I know you're working in this space. What have you got for me? What can I do to help you?" It actually happened to me last week. And it's a really good feeling when that starts to happen, because that means people recognize what you're doing in the business and that it actually is solving a problem. They want to get that solution into their business.
It's interesting because product market fit. Here's a great example of that same cake delivery business. It's called the One Stop. And what happened was these ladies called one day and said, "Hey, can you deliver these 4 kegs to our apartment? We're having a party." And I says, "Hey, absolutely." So I have the place I'm supposed to deliver those kegs. And these 4 ladies or whatever, these ladies were on the 4th floor of an apartment building out on their balcony saying, "Hey, just bring them up here." I'm like, "What?" Each one of those kegs weighed 162 pounds.
A lot
So I'd take all the flights up. And I'm not a big guy, but I was used to carrying, but it was so no more. After that delivery, I only delivered them to fraternity houses to a X point because I was never going to deliver 4 flights of stairs again. That's for sure. So know your customer. Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that customer development is a hugely important thing. I can go through many other examples and you've really helped me learn the importance and value, and to do that in a very transparent and defined way, to define your customers and get to know who they are and be able to deliver upon that promise. I think it's really been a great thing. And the other part is I think customer development fits within a program called the Lean Startup. And that's I think most business owners should be trying to work within a known and proven framework. Because if you're doing that, you're not always trying to recreate the wheel. Just stick to a known framework and listen and learn upon that. Though I would say there's one thing I'd like to get the Lean Startup to put in there, which would be, I'll call it capital development or getting capital ready, which comes after, as we've talked about, customer development. So I think that's a big piece.
Yeah, you and I had a conversation about this back at the IVMF. The whole thing is the customer discovery or development process really opens the door to capital, right? If you want to get others from the angel investment or VC or some other form of capital line of credit or whatever it is, at the end of the day, unless you can demonstrate you've got some kind of traction that is worth it for somebody to take a risk on you, it's going to be really hard to get capital. And a lot of times when you talk to the IVMF and you talk to veteran-owned businesses out there, a lot of us cite the access to capital as one of the biggest barriers for us. I'm not going to say that it's not a barrier, but I think where we have a big misconception inside most of our businesses is that we don't understand how important it is for us to do the customer discovery work and the development work, and then what that will do to actually open the availability to capital. Potentially existing barriers in there because of the fact that we're veterans and there are other minority groups associated. Yeah, there's probably still some other things in there, but we can really do a lot to break those barriers down by doing the work up front, to do the customer discovery, to open those doors. It's a lot easier to solve the rest of the problems that we're going to have as a business once we've.
Yeah, it's interesting because we always people talk about access to capital. And to me, it's not access to capital. I think you said it. It's exactly this. Are you capital ready?
Yes.
And there's a big difference. If you're capital ready, you can get to capital. You can have access to capital. But if you're not capital ready, you're not going to have access to capital. The chicken and the egg kind of thing. That's for sure.
I think that there's a big gap in training on how to actually become capital ready. I think that this whole process of customer discovery, and then the whole process of what do you need to do with your P&L sheets and your personal finances and all that stuff that needs to happen, all that work needs to happen in the year previous to where you need the capital.
That's right. 100%.
Be laying that groundwork before you actually go down that path. And if you don't, then you're going to really struggle because when you need the cash, it's too late.
That's right. So very good. Thank you so much. Let me ask another question here, because you and I can go on about customer development forever, because I think it's core and so important. That's for sure. Other than customer development, if prospective founders of businesses called you and said, Nate, what's an insight you want to share with me before I start my business, what would it be?
I think it would be that you really want to understand what your vision is for what you want to accomplish. You're going to have hard times in the business. There are going to be ups and downs. If money is your only motivation, you're going to quit a year in because it's going to you need to have a vision for what the world is going to be like after you do this. Why are you doing this? What is your motivation for doing this? Because honestly, there are really sucky days ahead. I don't know how else to say it. There are going to be some really bad days. You're going to feel one day you're going to feel on top of the world. You're going to be like, this is the best thing ever. And the next day you're going to be like, what in the world am I thinking? Why am I the one doing this? What possessed me to even think I could do this? And you're going to go from that extreme to the other. Elon Musk kind of referred to this as sort of breaking glass and chewing it and stirring it into the sunset. I didn't say it exactly the way he said it, but it's essentially that. To some extent, you have this vision of what the world could be like. In the process of that, you're eating glass. And so it's just this hard process of what you're going to go through as a founder. And you really need to know what your vision is and why you're doing that. And I think maybe not everybody has the same religious background that I have or that others have from a faith perspective, but I think faith is a big part of this. Like you need to understand what it is, what's going to take you through this when you hit those hard times. And for everybody, look a little bit different, but I think it's an important part. And I also think it's important for you to really talk about with your family what this is going to really mean, because it's going to be a sacrifice, not only on your part, but your family is going to also sacrifice for you to do this. And
That's right.
so what is that going to look like? Most of us in the military are very accustomed to sacrifice. If you're married and your marriage has been able to survive your military career through all the deployments and all the stuff that you go through in the military, you're probably on pretty good footing from a business perspective to be able to actually have the support that you need from a family perspective and from your friends and stuff like that. Some things to think about as you're starting that business. That shouldn't mean that you shouldn't do it. That just means that think about what you're going to need from a support perspective. And if you're a single person, then who are you going to be your people that you're going to rely on because you're going to need them?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're drawing close to an end here, and I appreciate your time so much. But Nate, who's another military community founder that we might want to champion and celebrate through this podcast? Because great people know great people. I'll just hear your insights on that.
There are a lot of really good people. I've met some fantastic people through the IVMF, Terry Strickland, Jesse T, Henry Baugh, just to name a few, and Sam Westfall down in Colorado Springs down here. There are so many people doing some amazing things with their businesses. And I think the thing that strikes me the most is that almost all of these guys, all of them really, I think their care is first, how do I serve? And then how do I make money as a business? And so I think that's something that is really common with veterans. It's almost like the business is important. I think we all think it's important, right? But it's almost secondary to why are we doing this? And I think
Bigger
that's
mission.
so many veteran businesses.
That's right. It's very true. Absolutely. To say thank you for today, we're going to donate $100 in your name to the Dick Wilgis Scholarship Fund. And that goes to help fund the first year of university or military community child to attend university or an accredited trade school. And so appreciate it. And this is just our small way to give back. That's so very cool. Nate, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on the MilCom Founders Podcast. If you know a MilCom founder with a story to share, reach out to us at milcomfounders.com. For each guest on our show, One Degree Financial donates $100 to the Dick Wilgis Veteran Entrepreneur Scholarship Fund, supporting education for children of a MilCom business owner. Stay ready.